On the Profiling TV segment this week, I'll be speaking with the General Secretary of ITUC-Africa, Joel Odigie. Tells me it's important for government to do the needful towards ensuring that migration laws are strengthened across the continent. A lot has been happening in the world of work in Africa. Right now, as we speak, some few days ago in Nairobi, Kenya, ITUC-Africa decided to come up with a capacity building towards ensuring fair recruitment across the continent. Can you tell us why it's expedient for ITUC-Africa to take this bold move at this point in time?
Yeah, quickly just to say that indeed, it is possible to have fair ethical recruitment on the continent if all parties, all stakeholders align to the process genuinely. But because we know that it takes collective effort of ensuring accountability in that regard, as trade unions, we have prioritized sharpening the skills, advocacy competence of trade unions to be able to contribute to that realization, which is why we had the meeting, the workshop in Nairobi, Kenya last week. We brought in recruitment agencies. We brought in migrant workers themselves. And then in the course of that meeting, the focus was how do we achieve the messaging, advocacy messages that could help galvanize fair recruitment practices on the continent. Thank you.
Can you tell us what are the challenges that trade unions face towards advancing the rights of workers when it comes to fair recruitment?
Okay, yeah, first is that migrant workers are one category of the different categories of workers that trade unions respond or cater for. For migrant workers, it's peculiar in the sense that, given their status, they will have to deal with quite a number of issues, immigration issues, issues around contracts, issues around the opportunity to enjoy freedom of association rights, even issues around access to justice, infractions around physical torture, infractions around sexual harassment, infractions even bordering on an overwork with no adequate compensation. And then, of course, there is the crisis for most of our migrant workers, especially those who go to the Middle East, the slavery practices that is linked to the kafala sponsorship system. So all of these are infractions that workers face, including occupational health and safety concern that has to do with how they live and work safely with their employers and the place of work. These challenges are myriad, but as we say, as trade unions, the idea is not to lament them. It's to ask ourselves, how do we contribute to solving the challenges that migrant workers are faced? And in solving the challenges, we have agreed that it is critical that we solve these challenges together with them. And in most cases, we flip the challenges out of opportunities for advancing the rights of these categories of workers.
During the capacity building, there was this conversation as regards bilateral agreement. How has bilateral agreement from point of origin to point of destination helped the advancement of decent work when it comes to migrant workers?
Okay, thank you. There are bilateral labor migration agreements of different kinds. First is that there is a bilateral labor migration agreement. You could also have multilateral labor migration agreement. But the ones that are popular and highly utilized in the governance of labor migration is a bilateral labor migration agreement between governments of countries of origin and those of countries of destination. What we find is that, first, there is a prescribed process to drafting bilateral labor migration agreement. In most cases, we find out that the processes are not effectively followed. But equally important is that the provisions in the bilateral labor migration agreement do not have right protection. It is focused in most cases just on demand and supply of labor without the consideration for the protection of the right of the migrant workers. So in most bilateral labor migration agreements, workers, people are treated as commodities. And these are the things we have seen, and we say, how do we reverse that together with government? In reversing that, together with the African Union and the International Labour Organization, guidelines on how to develop labor migration agreements have been developed. When these guidelines are not followed, in most cases, you find that a bilateral labor migration agreement, the one we refer to in acronyms as BLMAs, are usually supply-driven. Rather, let me say demand-driven. Those who are demanding labor, in other words, countries of destination, are the ones that will bring the agreement and ask countries of origin, supply driven side, to then just endorse. So what we find is that those who want this labor, these workers, are the ones who design, develop the agreement, and just get countries of origin, mostly countries from Africa, to sign. Countries of destination, mostly countries from the Middle East, Europe, and others. And then African government will just sign. When you sign, you find out that the protection of the rights of these workers are not, the mechanisms for the protection of the rights of these workers are not adequately provided for in the agreement. The model, the guideline the ILO and the African Union have prescribed is such that governments of countries of origin and countries of destination should try as much as possible to develop BLMAs in a tripartite approach. In other words, involve government, involve employers, involve trade unions. So that when you do this together, you can, this process can help contribute to better recruitment process, can help improve the governance of the agreement, can help improve the monitoring of the agreement, and ultimately can also help to ensure win-win for the different parties involved. There is also the trade union bilateral agreement. In other words, trade unions of countries of origin and trade unions of countries of destination. This is an initiative of workers and their trade union organizations to say, how do we also contribute to supporting the process of the BLMAs, the process of ensuring right and protection for migrant workers? When we come together as trade unions from the different countries, we want to see how we can contribute to the monitoring, to the accountability process of ensuring the right of migrant workers. And on the continent of Africa, there have been quite a number of bilateral trade union agreements. For instance, the Nigerian Labour Congress and the General Trade Union Federation of Bahrain have one. The Nigerian Labour Congress and Trade Union from Kuwait has one. Both share one. You have the Congress of Trade Unions, that is of Kenya, and Trade Union from Lebanon, they have one. The Central Trade Union Federation of Central Confederation of Ethiopian Trade Unions, and the FENASOR, a National Trade Union Center in Lebanon. They also have one such a trade union bilateral agreement to try to help drive protection for migrant workers. And then between governments, the BLMAs that I talked about, there are also quite a number, and new ones are even coming up. You have that of BLMAs between the government of Uganda and the government of Saudi Arabia and Qatar. You have the one between the government of Kenya and the government of Saudi Arabia and Qatar. You have the one between the government of Ghana and the government of Saudi Arabia. Different BLMAs in that sense you have.
Can you tell us what is ITUC doing especially for countries at the point of destination that do not sign any bilateral agreements towards advancing the rights of migrant workers?
Yeah, this is the advocacy we are pushing. First is to say that you do not need to have a bilateral agreement before you set up yourself for good engagement with possible countries that want to seek your collaboration. What you need is to follow the guide. The guide is there. What you need is to establish a robust country governance arrangement that is tripartite and sometimes tripartite clause, so that when we say tripartite clause, those outside the tripartite arrangement of workers, employers, and government, it could also be maybe migrant communities. It could also be maybe some civil society organizations that are very active in that work. To bring everybody together, have a working, functional national governance arrangement. When you do this and you practice it, when prospective partners come to want to negotiate BLMS with you, it will not be difficult to insert the right provisions in the agreement.
I can see that ITUC-Africa and some other international organizations are collaborating towards using technology to fight injustice that some migrant workers are faced with. Can you tell us more about this?
Yes. We embrace technology very strongly as one of such, but we also, in embracing technology, we talk very strongly about, secondly, is that we have experimented with it and we are seeing results. For instance, we develop what we call the Migrant Recruitment Advisor. It's an online recruitment tool available online for potential migrant workers who, in wanting to leave their country, for instance, Nigeria. There are a number of migrant organizations in Nigeria, migrant recruitment agencies in Nigeria. We put them online, we feed their profile online, and then we ask the potential migrant worker to, if you want to then migrate safely and orderly, and you want to do it with some predictability, we encourage you to go online, identify those recruitment agencies, and initiate relationship with them. And then we also encourage you to go back to that space. What was your experience like? Share your experience in that space. And then we also share the report with the recruitment agencies. And then they themselves can use the feedback from the migrant workers to improve the way they do things. This way, we contribute to ethical recruitment possibilities.
Thank you very much for your time.
Anytime. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Thank you.
And that's all we can take on today's edition of the program. Join us next week for a fresh edition of the show. I am Sharon Ijason. Thanks for watching, and remember that labor creates wealth.